Okay, all right. Welcome in, everyone. Looks like people are still joining us as we speak, but I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to another Get Legit webinar, Crunching the Numbers, Assessing Your Business's Financial Health, with Maria Herrera. Today is Thursday, March 6th, 2025. My name is Erin. I'm the Education and Communications Manager here at the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, and I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. It is our hope that anyone interested in commercial cannabis here in Nevada County will take the time to tune into these webinars, educate themselves, and continue to be or become stewards of the environment and of our community. The Get Legit educational series provides the preparation necessary to assist in securing a local cultivation permit and state cultivation license. This series includes webinars, support groups, business skills training, and a mentor program. And of course, all Get Legit webinars are online, they're free of charge, and they are open to the public. So what is the Alliance? We are a nonprofit trade association representing the local cannabis community here in Nevada County. Our mission is to support public policy initiatives through representative advocacy, provide educational opportunities, and create space for connection within the industry and the greater community. Some services that we provide to our members are a consistent voice and representation locally and at the statewide level. We have monthly educational webinars to assist with the permitting and licensing process, much like the one you're on today. We have a buddy program to pair permitted farmers with new farmers and a Slack online hub for resource sharing and local policy updates. We also do seasonal supply chain industry mixers and events that are for members only. There are many ways you can stay in touch with us. You can become a member if you are not a member already, and you can become a sponsor as well. I'm going to link to all the places on our website that you can go to sign up to become a member or a sponsor, and I'll link those in the chat. You can follow us on Facebook at Nevada County Cannabis Alliance or Instagram, which is at Nevada County Alliance. We also have a bi-monthly newsletter that you can subscribe to. It's on our website. I will link to that in the chat as well. And then any additional questions, I will link our email, which is info@nccannabisalliance.org, that you may have. You can reach out to us at any time. I want to give a shout out to our allied industry business sponsors, Ag Natural, Finest, Humboldt Seed Company, California Ag Labs, Mr. Beast Green Trees, and Gold Coast Botanicals Farm Labor. Thank you all so much for your support of the Alliance. So the format of today's webinar will be a presentation given by Maria Herrera with a Q&A to follow if you have questions. Your participation is encouraged. There is a chat section and a Q&A section in your Zoom window that you can ask questions throughout the webinar. If you have any, Maria will address them at the end. And then, of course, ask as many questions that you have. This webinar will be more useful for everyone if you do just ask the questions that you have as you go along. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website at nccannabisalliance.org under our Get Legit tab. I will also link that in the chat. And then, Diana, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you so much, Maria, for participating and for being our presenter today. You have a wealth of knowledge, so I'm really looking forward to the presentation. First, just to answer the question that came in the chat regarding our buddy program. Our buddy program is where we assist those that are just getting licensed with people who have already been permitted in Nevada County, and to take advantage of that. There may be some information on our website, but all you need to do is let us know and we will pair you. So Julius, I can follow up with you, and we can talk about it offline and get you paired up with somebody. And others that are new to licensing in Nevada County know that we do offer that opportunity. And a couple things that I want to say. One of our priorities for this year regarding local policy is deregulating our local cannabis regulations so that there's greater parity between agriculture regulations and cannabis regulations. So what does that look like? We are working for the ability, we are advocating for the ability for our local cannabis farmers to use what's called U-occupancy, which is agricultural accessory buildings for activities like drying and processing and storage versus having to build out full-on commercial buildings. And other items like creating greater use out of ag exempt shipping containers. So that's some of the local regulations that we are working on immediately. And then, of course, at a statewide level, items like excise tax, trying to prevent that increase of excise tax, hemp integration. We're advocating for lowering licensing fees. And we're really excited to be building that relationship with the DCC. They're going to be coming out here for tours next month. And so just, yeah, building that relationship between our industry and what's happening in Sacramento is important. Um, that's what I've got to say. Our doors are always open, so please reach out to us. We are a resource for you, for the community. So we're all in this together. All right, take it away.
All right,
Maria.
thank you so much. Thank you, Diana, and thank you, Erin, for the introduction. Some of you may know me from my days at the Alliance as former communications director, others as a cannabis consultant for licensing and compliance. I have, pivoted in the past few years from doing a lot of cannabis work, but I still believe in the importance of business planning, especially in cannabis farming. I find that a lot of cannabis farmers, or a lot of farmers in general, will go into the farming season without having a really good grasp of what that, farming cycle is going to look like, what their price per unit is, or what their distribution plan is for that harvest. So when Diana asked me to do this workshop, I was really happy to jump in. And just a few things about sort of the key takeaways that you will sort of, go home with after this session. One is understanding cost analysis. The idea of fixed cost versus variable cost, how you can calculate your cost of goods so that you have a really good grasp of what that price per unit is. And then, identifying inefficiencies and increasing savings, looking at your current operation and trying to figure out, what are sort of the common pitfalls of cannabis farming, especially in rural areas, that will lead to inefficiencies and higher costs per unit. We'll look at efficiency strategies for cost reductions. And lastly, we'll have, I'll have some tips for building a scalable and sustainable business model. And that includes, how to optimize your operations for a higher return on investment. So having said all that, we'll get right into our first module, which is understanding cost analysis. And why is this important? Is because, like I said before, a lot of farmers don't have, and this is not just unique to cannabis, I think it's unique to farming in general. There's not a really good idea of what that price per unit is. In your case is, a pound, although some farmers would like to calculate the cost per gram, and we'll talk about that later and how to do that versus, your calculations for a pound of cannabis. But a cost analysis is the process of identifying, assessing, and basically managing all of the costs associated with running your business. This is going to, at the beginning or prior to, planting season, to project your profitability, right? And if you make a few tweaks, it's going to allow you to increase that profitability. So one of the questions that I always ask people is like, how much does it really cost to produce 1 pound of cannabis? And a lot of farmers will have different answers for that question. Where can cost be reduced without sacrificing quality? Sacrificing quality is what a lot of cannabis farmers will tell me is the, what needs to happen in order to reduce cost in operations. And I don't really believe that that is true in a lot of cases. I think that it takes, going through your operations with a fine-tooth comb and trying to identify even the tiniest measures that you can take in order to, again, reduce costs. And what pricing model ensures profitability? And this workshop won't address sales and marketing, but I think uh, I'm going to dive a little bit into how you, as a cannabis farmers, can, perhaps team up with your neighbors, other cannabis farmers, or other members of the alliance, for example, to reduce costs and again, ensure profitability in your operations. Okay, so there's a lot of text here, and you're gonna have this presentation at the end of this workshop so that you can actually study it and let it sink in a little bit more. But I wanted to talk about the idea of fixed costs versus variable costs. And this is something that your bookkeeper is going to be really happy to learn that you have these concepts at the forefront of your thinking when you're um, separating expenses. So your fixed costs are expenses that remain constant regardless of your production levels. That means if you produce 100 pounds versus 200 pounds, these are your long-term costs, and they're always going to be the same. That means your land lease or your mortgage payment, your greenhouse or facility construction, and any upfront improvements that you make to the land in order to conduct your business. Compliance and licensing fees are always going to be the same unless you of course, go from 10,000 square feet to, or you have multiple properties and are operating multiple licenses. And then your things like your insurance costs. Your variable costs are things that are never going to be the same, and they're, sort of at the whim of a lot of different factors, whether it's like market forces or, how big your operation is that year. So we're talking about your seeds or clones, water and nutrients, electricity, labor, and packaging and distribution. And then you're going to have direct versus indirect costs. And, people often confuse these with, fixed versus variable costs. So direct costs is a cost that are explicitly associated with cultivating cannabis, right? And we talked about, a direct cost can also be a variable cost, but it's a direct cost nonetheless. So we're talking about seeds, clones, tissue cultures, soil, fertilizers and nutrients, pesticides, water usage, harvesting tools and equipment, labor specifically for cultivation, trimming, and processing, right? And then you have your indirect costs, which are also can be either fixed or variable costs. So bear with me for a second. Your indirect costs are things like marketing and branding. If you have a cannabis brand and you, for example, package your own products into jars, you have a cost associated with your website, your social media management, your logo design. You have some, labels, jars, things like that. Your farm infrastructure is also going to be an indirect cost. General labor costs like administrative, accounting, compliance officers, or consultants that you hire in order to help you run your business are all going to be examples of indirect costs. Okay, so one of the things that I always, and this was really interesting during what I call the transition years after Prop 215 and into the current legal framework, was that a lot of farmers didn't have written down all of those expenses that we just discussed, right? It was maybe in a notebook somewhere or in their heads. I hope and that over the past 7-8 years that this has change and people are keeping really good books and managing their data collection very well so that you know exactly what you're spending money on. Because if you're not going to be able to calculate your cost of goods sold, right? And this refers to the direct costs incurred in growing, harvesting, and processing cannabis. It represents your total expense required to produce that final unit of cannabis or that final jar of cannabis product that ends up in a dispensary shelf. So it's crucial, again, to have really good records of everything that you're spending throughout the year. And why is COGS so important? Is because it helps determines your baseline cost, right, per unit, per plant, or per pound. Now, I don't advocate for calculating your cost of goods per plant. Because you're not, unless you're a clone producer. You are selling cannabis per unit, so calculating it per gram or pound is going to give you a better idea of what your return on investment is. Knowing your COGS helps set profitable pricing strategies, and it helps you plan for those dry months as well. And it provides financial transparency for tax reporting and business planning. So that if you want to, for example, take on an investor, or you want to take on another property and partner up with somebody, that you have, your numbers crunch, pun intended. So again, COGS typically includes your seeds and clones, soil fertilizers, nutrients, water and irrigation costs, energy usage, direct labor costs for cultivation, and then packaging materials. You might use, again, jars or labels or exit bags, and then your processing and drying costs. So we're going to do some math over here, and you're going to have to forgive me because I just threw some numbers out there together. Ideally, I would have gotten together with one of you talented licensed cannabis farmers and figure out, what some of these costs are for you. But I just kind of like threw some numbers out there based on, again, when I used to do this kind of stuff. And on the left, we have a little table that identifies, some costs, right? Your seeds and clones, soils and fertilizer, water and irrigation, electricity, all that, and your total cost, or cost of goods sold, which for 100, this is hypothetical situation for a small cannabis farm, maybe producing 100 pounds of cannabis, and I use 100 pounds because it's an easy number. So we have about $28,200 in expenses. So how do you calculate what your price per pound is? You're gonna take your total cost of goods sold, right? Like all of those numbers that you've been collecting or that you collected from last year, for example, and your total yield for that year. So in this case, it's really easy. It costs this farmer $282 per pound, which is a pretty high number. I know that some farmers have managed, depending on, what your operation is, greenhouses, or I should say, indoor or outdoor, is gonna look a little bit different, right? So in this case, $282 per pound is pretty high. If the farmer sells it at $350 per pound, which is kind of like what I hear is market rate right now for wholesale, then the profit margin can be calculated with this very simple formula. You're going to take your selling price minus your cost of goods, divided by your selling price times 100. So in this case, and as you can see, the farmer comes up with a 19.42% profit margin. Long distance away from the 300% profit margin that cannabis farmers used to realize back in the day when, units were $3,000 a pound. And it didn't matter if it cost you $300, $400, $500 to produce a pound of cannabis, because again, the profit margins were so incredible. And, quite honestly, unlike any other business in the world, like if you look at other industries, the profit margins can be anywhere between 8%, 50% is like amazing. So this means that this farmer is making about 19.42 cents for each dollar earned is their profit after covering direct costs. So again, looking at market forces, if the market dictates that a pound of cannabis is about $350 per pound and your cost is $282 per pound to produce that unit, it is really important that we start looking at what kind of efficiencies you can implement in order to bring that $282 per pound number way down and increase that profit margin to maybe, a 25, 30, I mean, it would be amazing if you could increase it to 50%, right? Okay. So this is something that you can go ahead and do at home. I put a little exercise in there for writing down your estimated cost for each category using the formulas that I just provided, and then comparing your COGS to market prices to determine your potential profitability, right? And again, accurate record keeping of all these inputs is essential for determining an accurate, COGS. Okay. Any questions about this first module before we get into module 2? And Erin, you're going to have to tell me if there's any questions on the chat.
Yep. So we have one from Pat Rockwell. Licensing, lab fees, are they included in COG? And I guess you can answer that one, and there's a question after that.
I think licensing, and yes, it should be included, right? Because you have to test your product, right? And your licensing fees are going to probably fall under an example of a direct cost. And if your licensing fee is the same every year, right, then is a yeah, I said a direct cost, and it's not a variable cost. So just FYI, I hope that answers the question. And what was the second part of the question?
Profit margin doesn't include fixed costs. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Those are all the questions so far.
Okay, module 2. Identifying inefficiencies and increasing savings. I think that this is a really important part of this whole equation because even though we may say, well, I run a really efficient operation, but is this something that you audit every year where there may be, some ways that you can save money, or you can identify some wasteful, business practices. And the common areas of inefficiency in cannabis farmer typically include energy, water, but the biggest one, which I should have put first, is labor inefficiencies, and we'll talk about that down the line. Space utilization issues, overproduction to meet market demand that isn't necessarily there. Market fluctuation, which is something that you can help. Supply chain costs, inventory and post-harvest loss. We'll talk a little bit about how you can create inventory and post-harvest loss prevention practices that allow you to not be wasteful with all of the work that you put into cultivating cannabis for that year. And then compliance and regulatory issues, which relates a little bit more towards the idea of if you have really strict and clear standard operating procedures, you can avoid a lot of compliance or lack of compliance issues and avoid fines and things of that nature. Okay. So cost reduction strategies. One of the first things that I think is important to look at is energy and utility savings. You know, of course, a lot of people have already this that goes without saying, switch to LED lights, and this is for your, you know, light debt operators. You know, automating some lighting and HVAC systems for those who you know, use or have indoor operations. Again, using off-peak electricity rates is a tricky one because a lot of times this doesn't necessarily align with your lighting schedule on when your plants need that, you know, additional lighting. But you know, you can definitely use drip irrigation systems to reduce water waste compared to other types of irrigation. And then there's the rainwater collection and water recycling. And this doesn't necessarily, I know that there's some rules that have changed in terms of rainwater collection for, you know, cannabis irrigation. But, you know, if you're using water, well water, right, to irrigate your you know, your cannabis operation, but you also have a veggie garden. How is that veggie garden? Are you using also well water that uses, you know, some sort of electricity to be pumped out? So again, just looking at every little thing, and looking outside that fenced area, outside the license area on your property to identify those savings is going to be really important as well. And then you have labor efficiency and automation. And this is, again, the most important one, because I see time and time again, people are like, well, labor is my biggest cost. But then I see that the operation doesn't have any standard operating procedures for how to train employees. So the farmer spends 1 to 2 hours every day instructing the employee on how to do their job. That's 2 hours a day of, you know, wasted time, where if you spend, you know, 2 to 5, maybe 3 hours at the beginning of the employment cycle, really training that employee, and that employee has a checklist every day, it has written standard operating procedures that live on the property, then you're going to save, I mean, depending on what you pay that employee, 25, 30, $50 an hour, you know, that is what those are the savings that you're going to realize. So again, training workers on task specialization and increases speed and efficiency in anything, trimming, planning, and processing. I know a lot of farmers will take, you know, a written piece of paper from their employee on, you know, basically spelling out their hours. There's tons of free task scheduling software out there. This reduces downtime and optimizes labor hours. If you, as the employer, use this kind of software and you're already assigning tasks to your employees that they can look up on their phone, and this is free to use. And by the time they get to the farm in the morning, they already know what they're going to be doing that day. I cannot tell you how many hours in, you know, labor costs you're going to save. And again, hiring strategically and avoid overstaffing, you know, during slow seasons. All right, the next one is inventory and waste management. I see a lot of waste time and time again in terms of, you know, farmers not really having the proper standard operating procedures for curing their harvest, lacking the type of climate control storage that, you know, would prevent product degradation, properly tracking batch yields, and so that they can then create sales trends, you know, growing only what the market demands, and then reducing disposal costs, reducing, you know, composting plant waste, and then selling your byproduct. A lot of people don't do that. I hope that by now a lot of farmers have learned to, optimize every single tiny like leaf and trichome that falls off the plant as a revenue generating, item. So that goes without saying. A couple more cost reduction strategies. And this one's a big one, the supply chain and bulk purchasing. I know a lot of people are like, well, I'm just a small farmer. How can I negotiate with, a supplier for things like, soil or amendments? If you're here on this workshop, you are probably a member of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, and they have amazing resources for connecting you to one another. So what would it look like to, connect with other farmers, who you might see as competition, but they're definitely allies, to, again, go and negotiate with a supplier. One truck full of soil is going to have a different price than, 10 of them. And how do you, as a community, can come together and negotiate for lower prices? Again, I don't think that there's a collective in this county, but perhaps in other counties, if you're joining in from Humboldt or Trinity, that you can use to, again, pull orders and, again, flex that muscle to get discounts on things like soil, nutrients, and equipment. And also, like, try to, share things, sharing trimming machines and sharing equipment. I think that if the more you can be creative, I think the necessity is the mother of invention is a true statement. When things get tough, how do you get creative in order to realize the most savings? Again, act as a unit. This is not about survival of the fittest. This is about survival of the network and how you can create a network that can survive a lot of these extinction events that we're seeing, right? And then the last one is really, important, and also it goes without saying, is staying up to date on all your licensing requirements to avoid penalties for non-compliance, keeping accurate records, and investing in software that streamlines compliance tracking for licensed operators. Back in the days, a lot of the software was really expensive because it was just coming out, and it was the cannabis industry had that sort of green tax. But I bet those companies are also experiencing a lot of the, slowing down pains that the industry as a whole is experiencing, and you can, get better pricing on those kind of things. All right, any questions for module 2 in terms of identifying efficiency or inefficiencies, I should say? I do want to go over a few examples in a little activity identifying inefficiencies in your farm.
Maria, looks like we don't have any questions so far, but there is a comment from Elise Jackson, and she says that she recommends Connect Team. It's a free and mobile, it has a mobile app and computer access, great for tracking hours and giving daily tasks to employees. So that is a good recommendation. Connect Team from Elise Jackson. Thanks for sharing that.
Amazing. Thank you, Elise. Yes. No, I guess I do want to like ask the people, who are here today, what are your what are some of the biggest inefficiencies that you feel that, or maybe have a feeling that your farm is incurring? Can someone tell me, what are maybe like list the top 3 areas where, your farm experiences excessive costs? And don't say taxes and compliance and licensing. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
I think labor, for me, that's how I experience it. It's with definitely with labor.
Mhm. And how do you go about contracting your labor? Where do you find, where do you find labor for your farm and how do
Well,
you train them? Let's just go, yeah. How do you typically train a new employee? And
well,
is it
we
the same person each cycle, or are you kind of having different sort of turnover
we
every?
usually have one person who's with us like part-time on the farm. We grow just under 15,000 square feet. And we usually have one person with us part-time, a couple days a week. And then when we have like a bigger push, we get contract labor through Gold Coast. And I think I mean, the cost of labor for cannabis just seems really expensive compared to traditional ag farm labor.
Mhm.
And sometimes retraining to like the specificities of what we expect on the farm is a big one.
Mhm. And do you have standard operating procedures or a training manual that you provide those employees, when they set foot on your farm?
We have SOPs for processing, but we don't for all the other tasks. And we definitely do not have a training manual.
And what about Gold Coast? Gold Coast. So I assume how many people use Gold Coast? Is that a common contractor in the area?
Pretty common. I mean, people raise your hands if you use Gold Coast. Um, yeah, we've got one other farm that raised their hand, but I know that several farms locally here in Nevada County use them. Got a couple raising their hand.
Because what immediately comes to mind is if there is a labor contractor that's providing a lot of your labor for different farms, what would it look like to work with Gold Coast to, again, provide better trained employees, right, that have read your kind of sort of requirements ahead of time, that, perhaps that, Gold Coast retains some sort of employee trainer manual for each one of the farms that they like contract with, so that it's a little bit easier to, again, once the the employee arrives, they have maybe spent some time
Reading
reading the requirements or getting a lay of the land. I think that would, create some efficiencies in terms of, time management for those employees.
Right. And Gold Coast does that. They for each time you schedule Gold Coast, they have um information like there's like a way to upload any information that you want to convey to the team that's coming out beforehand. Um so I should do that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Use all of the tools, right, given to you by either contractors or, I know that a lot of people, right now there's a lot of equipment being liquidated from defunct properties all over the state and in other states, what would it look like for farmers to, get together and purchase equipment together that they can rotate around the different farms throughout the cultivation season. And again, this requires some really um different thinking. I understand that, culturally, cannabis farms have, hold on to or cannabis farmers, I should say, have hold on to the idea that, hey, I don't want other farmers meddling in my affairs or sharing equipment. But I think that where we are today, um, we can no longer afford the luxury of having, closed gates and not allowing people to come in and either help us or sharing equipment with other folks. I think the way you maintain good relationships with other farmers is having really good contracts and really good terms and agreements that are written down on paper and signed by everyone, for things like that, like sharing equipment and just, having dates. And again, getting organized. It might require a little bit more outside the box thinking of the farmer, but in the end, if it's going to increase that profit margin, then why not? Just try it and see if it works.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. One more note that someone mentioned, Elise Jackson, diving a little deeper into the labor costs. So labor plus trimming costs, how much to pay per pound, and the debate between hourly versus paying per pound, if you have any insight on that.
I'm not so like embedded in the industry anymore to be able to recommend an hourly rate. I think that, it depends. You know your product best, and you're going to be in a better position to determine. And that might change with each harvest, right? Like maybe you grow some really, really good product one year that requires just very little sort of um scissor hands, like that requires very little trimming, or that is better suited for running it through a machine. um and so you're gonna want to decide, okay, well, if I run it through a machine, then is it better to pay someone by the hour to clean it up, right? And if it's this super premium product that you don't want to, like, perhaps like um have any machines touch it, then and you can fetch more in the market because it's higher quality, then maybe it is better for you to invest a little bit more on paying a trimmer to touch that product per pound. um However, you have to remember that you have to trust your workers and properly train them, because a lot of trimmers are just going to want to hack things just to get through that pound as fast as they can. So there's so many variables to be able to answer that question properly. Again, I think it's about knowing your staff. Are you communicating with them? Are these people that are just kind of coming through and you're never seeing again? Or are these people that you're like have a relationship with? Back in the day when, people used to just pick up, travelers, or, it was a lot easier to, and again, the profit margins were bigger, so it just didn't matter. But now there's a lot of people that you can employ within the community that need jobs around here that probably are like, former farmers that can go get a license like you are. And so they're going to have a lot more knowledge and a lot more connection to the product, to the plant, that someone that's just coming into, through, perhaps a labor a contract labor service, and or someone who's never again seen a cannabis plant before. So all of that would I think help me, if I was a farmer, determine how much am I going to pay this employee. When you're in the corporate world, you look at the skills and qualifications of, a potential candidate, and you look at how long they've been doing the job before you decide to, pay them on the lower end of the scale, or is this somebody who you really want on your team, and therefore you're going to pay them a little bit more? Does that make sense?
Okay, cool. And then just we'll have one more comment, and then I think we should move forward. But Pat mentioned that and what your insight might be on this, Maria, is that SOPs don't necessarily always work. A big issue is that every farm does things differently. For example, pruning. So you have to spend time with them to show them what you want, and then triple and double check that they're doing it the right way. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna disagree that standard operating procedures don't always work. I think that well-written standard operating procedures always work because it is a step-by-step instruction of what you want someone to do. And that step-by-step instruction, it never changes, whatever your method of pruning is or when that pruning happens. I understand that farming is a very pun intended, organic, process, that every farmer has his own way of doing things. But again, if you think that, well, this person can grasp a step-by-step instruction written on a piece of paper, can you like couple that with a video of yourself? Like it doesn't have to be a 45-minute orientation video. It can be just a 5-minute something that you take on your phone, that of you doing it yourself, that gives a visual representation of the standard operating procedure, right? Or it can be the standard operating procedure can include some photographs of like how the plant should look after you're done pruning it, right? Or the size of leaves. So again, it's about how well written is that piece of information, and can the person that you're giving it to grasp the step-by-step instructions? So I hope that helps answer the questions.
Yeah, I think that's it for questions. Thanks so much, Maria.
Um, let's see. We're going to. So I did want to, before I move forward to this next module, I didn't spend too much time talking about your inventory and waste management, and giving you some examples, because I know a lot of farms waste an average of 5% of their yield, and, due to improper storage and these are things like, you end up with mold in some of your in your product, and like this 5%, depending on how big your operation is, it's a pretty considerate number. So one of the things that I would recommend is creating improved storage methods, right? And looking at the climate fluctuations, our seasons are changing, and being ahead of um the rainy season, because we are now starting to be, before we would have this like incredible sunny late falls into early winters, and we're starting to realize a little bit more rain, and just constantly having like that sort of looking at the weather. What is it going to do? Is it going to change my climate control area? Do I have leaks in my climate control area that I can be sealing? So just something that I didn't really cover that I wanted to just stress. And then now we're moving on to our third module, optimizing operations for higher return on investment. Again, if you're at that like 19%, how can you get to 25, 30, 40, 50%? It might not be something that you do all at once in one season, but if you are constantly having this goal of improving your return on investment, trust me, you're gonna get there. Even if it's little by little. So this module kind of provides some actionable strategies to build scalable and sustainable business models. The most important one that I think that, farmers tell me all the time, I didn't go into farming so I could like maintain spreadsheets. And I didn't go into farming so I could like, have to keep receipts. Well, the, truth is that farming is like any other business. You have to make financial planning a priority. Otherwise, financial lack of financial planning will just start eating away at your wallet. And so I think that one of the most important, the key elements of scalability and sustainability in business are some things, some of these concepts that we're going to cover. It's not always going to be possible depending on what kind of license type you have. But production capacity is going to be a really important one. Revenue diversification. Again, you're limited on what you can do in this department. Excuse me, cost management, which we talked a lot in this previous module. Compliance and licensing is a very simple one. And then again, we're not going to cover a lot of branding and market positioning or, sales and marketing in this workshop. But, I hear that there might be some interest in having one in the future, especially right before harvest season. Okay. Okay, so let me just actually go back. I want to talk a little bit about production capacity. So the ability to, and you're gonna tell me, I'm hoping to rely on some of you. Can you increase your plant count without incurring excessive costs increases? Can anyone answer that question? Is that possible? It's and staying within your footprint, right? Because your license only allows you to have a certain footprint. So if there's anyone in the chat room that can just give me an idea, do you think that you have the ability to increase plant count without incurring excessive cost increases? And I'm gonna rely on Erin to see if anyone, because I can't see the chat.
Yeah, no, so far no one has
Okay.
chatted into the chat yet. If anyone has anything they'd like to add, please do.
Because I think, production capacity doesn't just mean increasing your plant count. Production capacity means how many units can you get out of that one plant. And, the reality is that, whether you're a seasoned cultivator that have been doing this for decades or you're a new cultivator, the science, the information that we have at our disposal today is unlike any other and any time in history before. So availing yourself of that information, of the science of like, how can I make my plants give me, the sort of highest yield possible? How can I increase production without, for example, expensive, fertilizers and nutrients. We're not talking about growing new plants. We're talking about, again, just like in humans, right? Lifestyle interventions are going to generate the most healthy humans ever. You can pump yourself with vitamins and all these kind of things, but, sleep, nutrition, in movement are really the pillars of health. So if you can find what the pillars of health are for your plants and address those in a cost-effective way, trust me, you will increase your production capacity. And again, the information available out there that is readily available and free, it is it will take you a lifetime to get through. So perhaps part of your scalable and sustainable business strategy, it is to have a bank of data, of information, of sharing this data with, other farmers that allow you to increase your production capacity without necessarily increasing your footprint or increasing your plant count. The next one is revenue diversification, right? So, I mean, and you already know this, you're going to maximize, you're selling your flour, you're perhaps selling your, BC buds for things like pre-rolls. Maybe you're selling your trim for extracts. Are you, is it if you're an outdoor operator, Is it all going to extracts and you're like eliminating things like, trimming and a lot of processing and drying costs? Market adaptation and risk mitigation is key. And you should be planning, you should be willing to be flexible during the growing season to adapt to those market changes and to identify risk before you're in the midst of it. So let's say you're not going to have a high yield or like, you're not going to have the product that you thought you were going the type of product you thought you were going to have. What does it look like in May to start looking for a contract with an extraction company to take your entire harvest, right? As opposed to, the other possibilities is of having a lower quality product that is going to be a lot harder to move. So those are just a few things in that department. And again, so setting clear growth goals or setting clear goals, period. I think that, even planning a veggie garden takes planning. So I think that those dark months, those months where your soil is regenerating, where, perhaps you're not thinking necessarily yet of planting, a single clone down. What are you doing to, set your goals of maybe, again, increasing your production, for the next 3 years? You don't have to look at it from, season to season. And also taking into consideration all of the market forces that are happening, right? And anticipating the changes. If we are talking about extinction events, if you are seeing some of these big companies, right? Cannabis companies that came out of the gate running, now folding, right? Does that mean that you don't have a chance, or does that actually mean that, like, if you can hang in there, the small cannabis farmer will have a better chance to reaching the consumer now than ever before? So again, taking into consideration, constantly educating yourself on what's happening outside of your farm is going to be really important. Choosing the right expansion strategy. And by expansion, I don't mean necessarily expanding, again, increasing your plant count or optimizing your greenhouse space or acquiring more land. It also means how can you partner up with other farmers, excuse me, to share things, share equipment, and it perhaps means how to, now that you have your numbers down and you have a really good profit margin, well, maybe it's time to vertically integrate if you have that capacity. Or you can, again, instead of, create different products that you have, especially with some of these changes in the licensing framework that allows you to have, more licenses, or, allows you to have more access to the consumer directly than having to go through, the traditional dispensary model. And then, how to implement sustainable farming strategies. Not everybody is following sustainable farming practices. And so looking at your, energy and utility costs, how to create waste reduction where you can. And as I said before, building strategic partnerships is going to be really important for building a sustainable model. I think that, the time has come for farmers to look at each other and say, how can we go into, over the years, I've heard so many different iterations and plans of farms working with each other to create, cooperatives and things like that. And Some have worked, some have folded, but again, that doesn't mean that there isn't a tested and tried method for farmers to work together in order to, negotiate with dispensaries for, better pricing, negotiate with distributors, negotiate with, suppliers of things like fertilizers and amendments. And developing white label partnerships. I was thinking about I still have this cup that I've been drinking out of a Himalaya. I don't know if it's a brand that still is around. And so I Googled it right before this workshop, and I think that they're still around, and they claim to just buy from small Northern California farmers. So if you see a brand out there who's making a claim of buying just for Northern California farmers, go and call them out on it. Are they really buying from, small farms, and could you be one of them? So again, don't be afraid to knock on doors, to constantly be on the lookout for new partnerships and new ways to expand your business without necessarily increasing, production and creating a risk in that area. Sometimes all it takes is a phone call. You never know who's going to answer the phone at the other end. All right. And then we get some more of the sort of nitty-gritty kind of, what some people would consider boring stuff, which is revenue planning and forecasting. Again, to ensure financial stability and growth, you need to project your revenue based on market demand, your yield estimates, and your pricing trends. So it's a really tricky thing for you cannabis farmers because you don't, it's $350 right now per unit, maybe. What is it going to be in June? What is it going to be in October? The prices fluctuate so much, but can you do a little bit of detective work and anticipate those fluctuations, right? Like if you're seeing in the news that there's, some extinction event around the corner, whether it's like, increase in taxes, or licenses are about to become more expensive, or you see in the news, again, some, big companies folding. What does that mean for the overall market? And what is the market here compared to in Northern California compared to Southern California? What is happening at the federal level? Again, anticipating pricing trends might help you, with your financial planning. And then setting realistic pricing goals. I think that where a lot of farmers go wrong is thinking that they're going to get an XYZ amount for their product when the reality is much lower. So, think about if you're setting your goals are 350 and then you happen to get 600, all of a sudden, you're going to be in a much better situation. You plan for the 350, but not for the 600, which is, a good thing. And again, forecasting expenses and operating costs is the biggest thing. And can you create contingencies, right? Like, a lot of people calculate their costs, but they don't necessarily, anticipate things like, well, it snowed so much this year that my greenhouse collapsed and I didn't have money put aside for that kind of thing. So again, this goes into securing, financial resiliency and always maintaining a 3 to 6 months of operating expenses in reserve. I know that it's hard to hear, but you can build up to those 3 to 6 months over a few years. And, again, you might have to cut some other costs. But I think it's really important that if you want to stay in this game, that you anticipate, those big expenses. And again, if you have your financial planning, excuse me, really dialed in, this might be the time, and you look really good on paper, this might be the time. I know that you probably can qualify for a small business loan, but there might be some private, investors or impact investors, or you can get into some revenue sharing agreements in order to, again, expand your production capabilities. And then managing your cash flow. Cash flow issues are a major challenge for cannabis businesses because of your tax restrictions and delayed payments. This is a big issue. I'm reading that, there are farms out there that haven't gotten paid in many, many months. I think that uh, can everybody still see me and see the presentation?
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, this is a big issue, and I think it's one that is going to require some collective thinking and collective, sort of muscle flexing. But there are some more benevolent ways to deal with it, right? Like, what would it look like to offer discounts for early payments to wholesale buyers? I know that, again, you might be able to get to this point once you have increase your, profit margin, and then can afford to give up some of that profit margin in order to offer that discount. It's not something that I recommend right away. Just work on all your other stuff, work on creating efficiencies and increasing your profit margin before you start offering discount. But it's a tool. And if your, profit margin is at the 40-50% mark, then maybe you can afford to, again, kind of offer that type of discount. And also, like, obviously, like the bigger the, just be strategic. A lot of people say, well, someone will take everything, but I have to give them this big discount. Is that the most beneficial thing? Do you have your relationships with distributors dialed in? Again, I think that a lot of people get into this business looking at the profit margin, and they don't have the distribution part figured out. I think that what I have seen over the years is that those farmers who are still here from day one are the ones that had a really solid relationships with distributors and have maintained them. And so they're not just sitting on product without being able to sell it at the end of, the harvest season. And they establish strict payment terms. And I know this is a hard one too, because you can't always enforce it. I think that this again is the time where you need to be creative, whether it's, retailers or distributors, especially in smaller regions. We're not talking about Southern California, but in a lot of these areas, these licenses were given out to people who pledge to buy from local farmers and to pledge to, support the community and the overall cannabis community. And I think that, if you either through your trade associations or your, co-ops or collectives, you start and you have relationships with your elected officials, the ones that have been, in charge of giving these licenses, again, you can start flexing some muscles and say, well, we're not getting what we were promised and what you were promised out of these license holders. How can we work together in order to change that? And then again, just reducing some capital expenditures, leasing equipment instead of purchasing upfront or sharing it with other farmers, using share processing or drying facilities, and then managing your inventory efficiently. I think a big disconnect that I have seen over the years is farmers who want to grow a really amazing strain that they have been, breeding for decades, and the preferences of the consumer. There's such a gap between the farmer and the consumer, both in terms of culture and in terms of preferences. And so how can you as a farmer get closer to your consumer? How can you go to, whether it's your local retailer or one really far away, and just observe, what are people buying? What do people want to use? Are they using, um, when right after Prop 215, when legalization, the current framework was approved, there was sort of this explosion of products, right? Of bath bombs and a lot of different lotions, and you've seen a lot of these brands that came running out of the gate, not disappear. They're not in business anymore, because I think that the consumer had this sort of reaction of like, oh, this is all great, but then, kind of forgot about those products, or there hasn't been enough, follow through, or the products weren't, that effective. What do people want now? And how can we continue to educate the consumer on what is a good product, right? On what they should be using. Because, we have all these ideas of, what good cannabis, craft cannabis, should be like, and what the consumer should be using. But at the end of the day, the consumer is either on a budget or doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't know that you exist. So again, this is for another workshop, this idea of, marketing and also banding together in order to spread the word about the Northern California, the small craft cannabis farmer, and how important we are to the entire cannabis economic ecosystem. That story, I don't think is being told as much as we wanted to tell it, and I think that there's a host of reasons for that. But you can do a small part. Social media is a huge tool. Use it as a farmer to just, reach out to your consumers. And then the next thing is managing your inventory efficiently. Excuse me, rotating product batches to ensure, freshness and consistent sales. Obviously, your outdoor farmers are not gonna be able to do this as well as your, light dep producers or ingrown. But I think that this is where your storage and your curing is gonna be so important in your planning throughout the year. Because do you want to get rid of your entire harvest in October, November, December? Do you want to save some of that for the drier months? Or are you following the same trend that everybody is? And so, keeping those prices low, because then everybody has like releases what they've been holding on to in like, March, May, June, July, when there shouldn't be any, fresh cannabis in the market. So I think looking at all those things and anticipating and planning accordingly. I know it seems like a lot. You already have to deal with like things like looking at the weather and testing your soil. But again, it is part of running a business. A business, a restaurant owner has to think of all the things, not just making the food. So I encourage you to kind of, again, there's more education, free education available than ever before. And so I encourage you to spend some time every week to educating yourself on how to be a proper, CFO of your, small cannabis enterprise, how to be a marketer, how to be an educator, because this is going to mean the, either success or failure of your operation. And that's all I have. I did a lot. I kind of went through this really fast, but I wanted to allot enough time to answer all of your questions. please take advantage of the fact that you have me for a little while longer and ask away. Um, Again, I have a lot of, love and appreciation for the cannabis industry and, more than anything, the cannabis plant. I believe in the power of the plant to heal people and to change perspectives. And so I think that the work that you're doing is a very important work. I encourage you to stay positive and optimistic. I think, it's been a rough few years for a lot of you, but I'm glad to see some familiar names here. And just know that your work doesn't go unappreciated. And I hope that one day we can all collectively tell the story of the Northern cannabis farmer and how it is sort of like the spark, pun intended, that created this whole industry that is now nationwide. And all of you deserve the recognition for the hard work that you've put in and hanging in there through these tough transition years.
Beautifully said, Maria. Thank you. I could not agree more. Does anyone have any questions for Maria? It's a good opportunity.
I don't have a question, Maria, but I do want to make sure that people know how to find you. If you have your email and your phone number, however you want people to get in touch.
Sure, yeah, you can if you want to sit with this presentation and you're crunching numbers and you have some questions, you can reach me at Maria at SIA Communications, SIA Communications.com. You can go on my website, siacommunications.com, for some information on some of the businesses and some of the work that I do. And that's yeah, pretty much it. I'm not gonna give you my phone number because I don't answer numbers that I don't know. So just there is a contact form on my website that you can fill out, or like I said, now you have my email. I'm pretty good at answering emails. And I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding how to properly create your financial projections and how to crunch your numbers.
Yeah, and if you need some time to think of some questions and formulate them, then the email that Maria provided is in the chat. This presentation will also it's recorded, so it will be available on our website, and I will be posting that within the next week. It'll be in our newsletter, so if you'd like to receive that, go online and subscribe to our newsletter. It'll also be on our social media pages, so be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to have access to those videos, and then you can always come back to this and really dive into it and reach out with other questions when you have time.
And I wanted to also say thank you for your message, Julius. We have some upcoming webinars. Our webinar next month is going to be with the local attorney, Huck Ingram, and we are going to be discussing entity structures and tax implications of different entity structures. And then we will also kind of be talking, it'll be a ask an attorney session. So bring your questions that you'd like to ask an attorney. But we'll also be talking about advice on how to get paid when you have not been getting paid from distributors, dispensaries, manufacturers, whomever. We also have a partnership that has with the Master Gardeners of Nevada County, and we will be doing a series of in-person workshops on mole and voles in our gardens, composting, irrigation, all sorts of farming techniques. We'll be having workshops with Master Gardeners of Nevada County. And then we actually just got confirmed today a biochar workshop, teaching people how to make biochar on their land. And that's going to be at the end of the month. So stay tuned for our newsletter for that. They'll be in person. And, Maria, you are a brilliant, brilliant businesswoman. What would you say to our farmers about getting paid when we're not getting paid?
Yeah, so I mean, it's all about strategy, right? So it's looking at, okay, who is not paying you and how many of your peers are not getting paid by the same person? Again, there's power in numbers, right? And again, the you can save money if you need to engage an attorney. You can save money by, if there's 10 of you not getting paid by the same distributor, the same dispensary, you can save money by getting together and hiring an attorney. The attorney is not going to necessarily charge each and every one of you. You're kind of filing a claim as a group. The other thing is, like, as not as a business person, but as a strategist, right? And also like a policy strategist, you having a cannabis license, having a distribution license and a dispensary license is a privilege in this state. And it's a privilege at, we do have a dual, as burdensome as it is, you have a dual licensing system where you have to get licensed by a local municipality and you have to get licensed by the state, right? And so if your distributor is in, let's say, just to name our towns here, Nevada City or Grass Valley, right? There is a government body that approved that license, right, under a certain premise. They had to look at a business plan. They had to look at all the folks who are part of the board of that organization, right? What does it look like for you to start, again, partnering with your other farmers who are not getting paid and lobbying your, local officials to pull that license, to, penalize that license holder for creating financial burden on other license holders who are having to pay taxes to your local community, right? So again, being really strategic about it. And I think that, your attorney person who, if you have a workshop with an attorney, is going to give you some ideas on how to navigate the legal system. But you don't have to only use the legal system. You can use other systems that are in place in order to get yourself paid. You can, appeal directly to the consumer. You can create campaigns, social media campaigns against, certain distributors or brands. Let's say, it's a brand that is, you're fulfilling, I'm not going to mention any names, but you're fulfilling a brand and people love that brand, but they don't know that they're screwing the small guy who's providing the product. So how can you create a very effective? We lived in an opinion economy. It's not longer a truth economy. It's an opinion economy. And if you can create a negative opinion of someone who's not paying you, that I can, probably predict that they're gonna move really fast in order to avoid, having to, reverse that or having to spend money reversing that. So you do have some sort of recourse. You're not totally, yeah, you have there's things that you can do.
Thank you, and thank you for the commentary, Elise. That's really helpful, Maria. It's, you've got such a great perspective and advice on this, so that's really helpful. What about anybody else? This is a really great opportunity that we have the brilliant and talented business strategist Maria Herrera with us. And so if you have questions, please ask them. I think it's great for us to all hear questions so we can all be informed of your answers, Maria.
Yeah, and again, reach out if you have any, questions on the line. The presentation is, can be, I don't know, Diana, will you be emailing it to everyone or making it available on your?
It will be on the Cannabis Alliance YouTube playlist.
Okay.
And there was a question, oh, right, there was a question about future webinars. We list them all. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up through nccannabisalliance.org. Sign up to join our newsletter. That's where we post all of our upcoming webinars and opportunities. And if you're local, we'll be doing in-person workshops as well. Cool.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Hi, Pat. It's been a while. Sending love
right.
to everyone. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you all. Have a great evening. Thanks, Maria.
Maria. Take care, everyone.
Erin, bye.
Bye.